Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Head of Strength and Conditioning at Northants County Cricket, Chris Toombs. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Valve Performance, the team behind the NordBord hamstring testing system. So the NordBord is the fastest and easiest, most accurate way to measure hamstring strength in under 90 seconds. So the NordBord gives you the right information so you can make the right decisions for your players at the right time. So it's already in use by over half the Premier League and dozens of other elite teams around the world. So the NordBord testing system is on its way to becoming the gold standard for measuring and monitoring hamstring strength. So if you are interested in getting to know anything more about the NordBord, you can visit Vald Performance, that's VALD performance.com, to find out more. Thanks for tuning in to episode 83 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today got a really good friend of mine who appeared in episode 8, so when the podcast was very new, in Chris Toombs. So things have changed a lot for Chris over the last probably 6 months, coming back from the US and getting into professional cricket, into county cricket. So it's a really interesting chat with Chris. Hopefully it comes across as a bit of a chat because we needed to catch up. So we have some good talks over the phone and on Skype. So I thought it'd be just good to turn it into a podcast and make it more official. So just before we get into the chat with Chris, I've got a new feature on the podcast, and one that I kind of trialled a little bit ago with Marco Altini from HIV for Training. So it's going to be a segment which is going to be between 2 and 3 minutes, and it's going to be a really concise couple of minutes from CoachMePlus. So CoachMePlus provides an applied sports science software platform designed to meet the needs of kind of athletic trainers, S&C coaches. So it's a customized solution, and it's become a real industry standard athlete management system for NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, performance gyms, and the military. So they're going to provide a segment which this week is going to drill down into 2 or 3 minutes of detailed information about dehydration. So hopefully it'll just add to the great content that the guests provide on the podcast. Hopefully each episode's intro won't last this long. I'm just giving you a bit of an intro into what's happening. So that's CoachMePlus. I would also encourage you to get over to their website, which is CoachMePlus.com, and subscribe to their weekly newsletter, which I have subscribed to for a while. It gives really good information about Sports Science Weekly. So I hope you enjoy the chat with Chris. Just 2-3 minutes from CoachMePlus talking about dehydration, which is a great little segment, which I hope you enjoy. And I will speak to you soon.
There are two things athletes battle with almost on a daily basis. One is dehydration. The other one's glycogen depletion. We're going to focus on dehydration today. What are the consequences with regard to dehydration? A 2% loss is up to 10% decline in performance. A 5% loss is a 30% decrease in work capacity. And part of the problem is that we try to educate our athletes on how important hydration is, and we seem to be doing a poor job of it in general as strength and conditioning and sports performance people. We want our athletes to weigh in and weigh out, and typically we get them to weigh in, and what happens is they don't weigh out, and so they can't possibly know what their fluid loss is, because all they have is the weigh in. The typical fluid loss in a game or practice is about 1 to 3 liters of sweat, per hour. And that's about 2 to 8 pounds. And this is a large amount of fluid. A typical lineman, for example, in the NFL would lose about 5.8 liters per practice, which is a sodium loss of 5 to 14 grams. And if he doesn't replace that, then he's literally in a situation where the chance for him to pull, strain, or tear, is much greater. And in addition to that, his agility, his endurance, his speed, his power is also going to decline. So, it's imperative for us to look at this in such a way that we're educating them and teaching them about the importance of knowing how to get that fluid back in. And one of the ways that we can do that is talk about it in terms of fluid loss, not weight. This isn't about scale weight. It's not about fat weight. It's not about muscle. It's literally about fluid. And if we can get them to understand by weighing in and weighing out, they can go to a hydration station and select a post-recovery drink that has both carbohydrates and electrolytes, and then focus in on the electrolyte drinks like a Pedialyte or the Right Stuff. These things are rich in electrolytes and actually help the fluid get into the cell, which creates that fluid balance that's much needed. And this protects now the athlete from pulls and strains and tears. It allows that muscle to be adaptable to speed changes and power changes. It's a much safer muscle and creates a better situation for the athlete. We need to teach them this, and if we do, then we'll be successful in proper hydrating.
Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today it is a very informal chat with a good friend from the podcast. I think it was number 8. So early doors. So coming on for a part 2 is Chris Toombs. So welcome to the podcast for a part 2, Chris.
Thanks, Rob. Absolutely honoured to get the second invitation. To be honest, it's grown exponentially since the fledgling days. So it's nice to be back on for number 2.
Built the foundations, the early doors, isn't it? Built the foundation.
Absolutely.
And for anyone who hasn't tuned into episode 8, do you just want to give us a bit of a background on probably how things have changed? Maybe how things have changed since episode 8. What went on before then, and what's going on now?
Yeah, so prior to episode 8, I was strength and conditioning coach at the Cardiff Blues down in Wales for a fairly long time, 9 years, and prior to that, I'd done a little bit of work with Leicester Tigers and Leicester Foxes, the cricket team. And whilst recording number 8, I was transitioning across the pond to the United States, and I just started working for a rugby organisation over there that was then called Rugby Rugby and is now since rebranded to a sort of more global entity, I guess, with rugby being the forefront of the business, but also looking at American football and how rugby can inspire and change the face of American football with regards to safety in terms of tackling technique and obviously effectiveness as well. And over the last 2 years, I've actually transitioned back full circle to the UK and now head of strength and conditioning at Northamptonshire County Cricket Club, and looking to hopefully sort of share with you the lessons that I learnt over there in the US, and go from there.
So it seems it is a big thing for people, and it's a lot of people's S&C coaches' kind of goal and dream to move to the US. How did the move come about? I mean, we maybe have gone through this in episode 8, but it's quite interesting anyway. How did that come about? And since then, what's been the kind of turnaround to eventually come back?
Sure, I'll try and do this as quickly as I can, but the reality was basically a young family, married to an American citizen, and like you say, like everybody else in strength and conditioning, just sort of fresh challenge, fresh opportunities potentially, and just the reality of having kind of the opportunity to work in America through kind of having a green card was an opportunity that at the time I thought was really well worth taking. So built some connectivity with some rugby people in America. There's USA Rugby at the time were just not in a real position to offer anything permanent, but I'd heard about Rugby Rugby, and I met the CEO, who was a British guy who had been involved with the Rugby World Cups over the years, and essentially had an interview with him and got offered a job in Seattle. And just over the last 2 years, really, just to kind of really overall synopsis, just be involved in a process of sort of rugby's growth in North America, to the point where, ironically, as I was relocating back to the UK, rugby in North America, USA particularly, has just literally turned professional over the last month or so, and it's now there's a 6-team franchise sort of opportunity in America for rugby to go professional, and I think that's been in part due to people like Atavus's involvement in rugby in the United States, but also just everybody kind of really thinking that rugby in America is the sort of sleeping giant. And there's a few English coaches now over there doing a really good job with the sevens programming and giving it the profile that kind of it deserves, I suppose, or that it merits with regards to taking the sport and driving it towards kind of Olympic status and also professional status in terms of the 15-a-side game.
Mm-hmm. So, as a high performance manager out there, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the kind of the connections you made and how it kind of opened doors to witness big college programs and professional, obviously,
sure.
NFL with the Seahawks
one
and things?
thing that would... No, absolutely. I mean, that was the one thing that was a really good eye-opener for me as a kind of practitioner, and having a role that was more than just hands-on delivery of strength and conditioning provision was really good for me personally as a sort of developmental tool from a career standpoint. And yeah, I mean, the reality of where I was positioned geographically, I mean, I was really fortunate enough to have sort of mutual connectivity with a Seahawks employee through Darren Roberts, who's based up in Manchester and runs a great program for extreme sports. So I managed to connect with Dean quite quickly in my tenure at my role at Atavus, and just build a relationship with the Seahawks through my kind of 20 years worth of knowing Dean in his capacities as a professional strength and conditioning coach in the UK here, and just obviously having exposure to the Seattle Sounders, who run a really good sort of sports science program and run an educational kind of summer conference every year, which was brilliant in terms of just getting to know strength and conditioning and sports science across lots of different people in the American sort of marketplace, and see how that's evolved and how sports science is emerging as a real kind of dominating kind of performance area, especially over the last 2 or 3 years particularly. And just I think from my point of view, just Atavus as a company gave me a really good opportunity to essentially outsource consulting services through rugby, particularly to other states, and that also allowed me to kind of meet up with people like Andrea OD down in Kansas and see what sort of really sort of cutting edge programming that KU basketball particularly provide, and through sports science application, just get to meet those people and get to talk and sort of subsequently, I guess, keep on developing my own performance services, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So what when you mentioned about Atavus kind of branching out into different sports, is it a similar thing they want to do in rugby? To what they want to do in rugby, sorry, in different sports?
It's no, not really. I mean, essentially the main kind of business model is grow rugby in North America is their primary kind of purpose, but the secondary sort of offshoot of that, I suppose, is for those who follow American football and follow sort of the concussion lawsuits that are kind of plaguing the NFL, I suppose, is it's just kind of grabbing hold of the concept that the Seahawks, I guess, first started to draw upon 5 or 6 years ago. And basically, it's essentially rugby-inspired tackling in American football to, one, make the sport or make the players more effective at the skill, but also being, very, very prevalent is the head injury issue and the concussion issue. And obviously, from our point of view, from a rugby technical standpoint, is taking the head out of the tackle and obviously using your shoulders. So I think there's been a lot of leverage gained from the Seahawks model for a start, who are kind of renowned for their defensive capabilities, but also Atavus are involved with Ohio State, who are either their current national champions in the D1 schools, colleges, or if they're not national champions, they're kind of there or thereabouts year in, year out. And they've kind of taken on the consultancy services. And no, it's just grabbing hold of rugby. And I think, if you're following the kind of mainstream American sport media, you've got a guy who plays for the New England Patriots, who are current Super Bowl champions, he's taken a sabbatical from American football to try and realise his ambitions playing sevens in the Olympics. So he's crossing over sports, and rugby and football have obviously got a degree of similarity when it comes to physicality, and some level of kind of similarity when it comes to physical preparation. But it's interesting how that, like I say, that whole evolving marketplace in North America is huge. And I think some of your other podcast guests have subsequently moved from east to west in terms of people moving from the UK to the US to take up opportunities, especially within sports science. So for me, it's just interesting to have sort of both sides of that kind of employment opportunity equation to kind of fall back on as experiences, and just see how that does continue to evolve, because we both know that sports science particularly is still a pretty fast moving area in the profession.
Mm-hmm. How do you think how are you viewed as someone from the UK, and how are other kind of foreigners seen by American athletes and American coaches? How are they seen, as in what do they think they're bringing? And like you say, there is an influx of Aussies, British going over there. They feel like it's a bit of an influx and a bit of a downer on what they're doing, or are they kind of embracing it?
Yeah, a little bit of both. It's interesting, actually. Like I say, Atibus has evolved quite quickly over the last 2 or 3 years, and one of the things that I first found was that the American rugby players, particularly, very, very patriotic as people generally, as most people know if they've been over there. But I had to break down a few barriers with regards to kind of, here's another Brit taking one of our jobs, and why can't an American do the job that you do? And maybe just in jest and in that kind of rugby type environment where there's a little bit of banter flying around, which is obviously acceptable. We're just some of the sort of more rugged players, should we say, just would challenge you in a nice way, but also with an undertone of what actual expertise you bring into the party. And from my perspective, no issue with softening them with your communication skills, and just essentially offering kind of a secondary perspective on things. And I think that was one of the crucial elements for me. It's just there's a lot of great S&C coaches in America, don't get me wrong, and that will continue to be the case for years to come. But I think when it comes to sort of specifics of rugby as a sport in America particularly, where there's not the level of expertise in terms of the sport it's basically professionally 1 year old, 1 month old in fact. So there's not the level of kind of, I guess, there is a degree of specialism involved in preparing athletes to play at the highest level, international level particularly. So I think from that point of view, I think it was easy after a while, especially just putting your own stamp on a program or on a way that you deliver in certain aspects, that you can sort of justify your level of expertise against kind of where the sport was there as a profession. And I'm guessing that's going to change, like I say, over the next 2 or 3 years, particularly as professional rugby grabs hold over there. And we both know there's unbelievable resources in terms of accessibility to good facilities, fantastic gyms, integrated technology. We both know that people like Catapult over there and sort of lots of different technologies, not just sort of GPS, but there's never going to be a shortage of access to great facilities and great technology. So then there's that sort of tertiary element, or for me the most important element, that sort of interaction of player coach and building on that kind of soft skill and that actual coaching pedigree that's going to help elicit sort of that performance outcome that you're after.
Mm-hmm. So over here, I think probably people would back me up on this, thinking that the kind of college system and the kind of culture in the US brings about like more of a a rounded athlete when it gets to that kind of adult age. Is that the case, and is that what you saw compared to the guys that you'd worked with over here?
I think, a lot of the players who've obviously been exposed to rugby, particularly, that was my sort of main area of exposure in terms of experience. Most of them are multi-sport athletes, and I think one of the biggest things that strikes you is that there is a well-rounded kind of athlete amongst them, but then obviously their sort of rugby IQ wasn't quite at the level they're required when it comes to sort of playing a level up or playing at international level in terms of just skill execution and being exposed to sort of those higher level of activities that are going to be required to be successful as you sort of go up the chain of difficulty, I suppose. But no, it's an interesting one, because I just think there is the sports culture, especially going to college, where I know for those people who are listening in the UK or even anywhere else outside of America, the scholarship system and just the way that the professional sports are scouting college systems as soon as you almost enter college, there is a high degree of pressure to accelerate potentially a sort of a LeBron James type character in basketball, for example. I know that Coach Hoodie down at KU had basketballers in her program for only a year before they get drafted to the NBA. There's enormous pressure not to necessarily finish your college education, just to get yourself to the pros as fast as you can. And I think that's also applicable in football as well. And I mean, that's one of the things that was just unbelievable from my personal experience with regards to just witnessing some of the things in D1 colleges when it comes to sort of football budgets and operationally they don't pay players, but I think there's 100 colleges in the US that have a football budget annually of over $100 million, and I think it's just staggering. You got that many colleges with also 100,000 seater stadiums, and it's just college sport and the NFL particularly are just two juggernauts from a business standpoint, and obviously a sort of high caliber athletic standpoint, where I really did love the exposure I had at the Seahawks. I got to know one of the sports scientists very, very well, consider him like a close friend now. We speak most weeks, even now in Seattle to the UK and back. And just some of the stuff that's going to go on in those kind of sporting environments, just mind-blowing in terms of the sort of innovation that's potentially available, especially with the resourcing that they have. But I know that some of these things take time to sort of the interventions and the solutions that sort of the Seahawks want to put into their programming is going to take time and lots of collaboration. And I think Seattle being the tech sector or the tech capital of America is really, really helpful for, just that intertwining of, like I say, performance solutions with technology, and not necessarily technology replacing, people, but people utilizing technology to maximize performance outcomes. And I think that's one of the big lessons and take homes that I had. I know, it sounds a bit pretentious, but I know that I can't say a great deal about what's coming next for the Seahawks, but just being on the periphery of that, it's just some really, really fascinating things. And I know that you had Scott Draw on recently when he came to one of his episodes. Some of the collaborations of enterprise, big business, sporting organizations, it's just like, from my point of view, I know I'm going on a little bit, but just the high performance manager role and sort of more global performance service roles for me aren't just about looking in rugby to get better at rugby, looking at cricket to get better at cricket. For me, it's right, what can, and I think Scott obviously alludes to this in his episode, what can Microsoft do to help the Seahawks gain a performance advantage? And obviously those conversations are occurring in Seattle probably at the moment, because the two organizations are based in the same city. It's Activus and Volt Athletics, for example, got together and collaborated on digital solutions when it comes to strength and conditioning and scaling good quality strength and conditioning programming, because one, the two companies are in the same city, but also it helps just building, and it goes back to that full circle that we're going to touch upon time and time again, goes back to that people make better decisions when they're better informed, or when they've got that technology to help them. It's not necessarily going to take precedence over managerial decision making, but it just helps make informed decisions, or it helps make your business or your team perform better. And that's the kind of thing that really interests me about the marketplace at the moment, and how that's all going to evolve, and how, given good technology and good decision making, hopefully across whichever sport that you're involved in, performance outcomes become, better, and the process become better. And I think that was, those take home messages for me. And like I say, I'm massively kind of excited about, my current role and what I can give to that. But the lessons that I learned in the 2 years I was away were just 2 really, really important years in terms of my own personal development.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've spoke about this numerous times. I think about. I mean, you mentioned Andrea OD there. What were the main things that you kind of specifically saw at these places that really impressed you? I mean, I know you spoke about a couple, the use of technology and things, but maybe not they were using a gym aware, but how they were kind of integrating that well into their program, and it almost seemed kind of as it's always been there. It wasn't just a fancy bit of kit that got kind of wheeled out and used and then wheeled back in. It's kind of a bit of an aura around it. But what was the main takeaway for you with regards to the use of the technology and the money and the facility?
Oh, mate. I mean, that was one of the biggest eye openers. I mean, Lawrence, Kansas is pretty much in the middle of nowhere if you know your geography of America. And like I said, just the reality of getting to Kansas was through a consultancy project that I had to do with the rugby programming at Atavus, which was great. And that just let me, Andrea kindly opened the front door on a Sunday morning to kind of show me around KU's performance facilities. And I think it was just the basketball gym. She might correct me if I'm wrong, but it was absolutely unbelievable. You walk through the front door, the 6 force plates with the Sparta science technology, and I think I don't want to steal Dr. Phil Wagner's thunder because I think he's coming on for a podcast. But the reality is you've essentially got $120,000 worth of force plates as you walk through the front door. You've got 10 or 12 racks and platforms all kitted out with elite form, obviously the kind of, I don't know, what do you call it, the Tendo unit on PEDs on every single platform. You just got, for me, I mean, I think Coach Hoodie's been there 10 or 12 seasons. I think they've won the Big 12 or the Big 10, whichever conference they're in. I think 11 out of the 12 times she's been there. I just think that the overview that I had of that kind of situation was, apart from having absolutely unbelievable facilities, which is great, the program had a really, really sort of well-organized, process-driven, very purposeful environment to do your work, the historical emphasis that, KU is a highly successful program, and you are taking on the legacy of this when you end up, being recruited to this program. And I think, like I was saying about kind of the pressure of basketball or colleges to produce the next LeBron or the next Kobe Bryant or whoever else is hot off the press. I think Andy Wiggins, who was drafted either first or second in the draft a couple of years ago, spent a year there. That's it, just spent a year there. So it was just, the overall kind of assessment was that, yes, these places have absolutely fantastic facilities, but they've also got really, really smart people operating, or at least driving, performances around kind of good programming, and like I say, that integration of, good quality sports science and the principles that sort of, we all kind of abide by when it comes to sort of performance preparation.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a few minutes ago about Vault, obviously, again, tech company based in Seattle. Do you just want to talk to us a little bit about Vault itself and the kind of that side of the industry, and obviously maybe some of its competitors and what they actually do, and how you've got integrated with them and brought them over to the UK?
Sure. No, I mean, that's great. Thanks for asking. The reality of that kind of relationship was, like I say, the Seattle-based tech company that originally developed its platform to essentially roll out good quality programming to D2 and D3 colleges that didn't necessarily have the capacity to deal with so many student athletes, with kind of people writing programs day after day, delivering 10 to 12 hours a day. Like I say, I was really lucky to go and see, high performance programs at the University of Washington, 6 or 8 full-time S&C coaches, D1 school, resourced to the max. And even, to be honest with you, ironically, they've just taken on Bolt Athletics online platform, more so to kind of improve the labour intensiveness of program writing, and it's essentially an S&C digital solution, algorithms to make working practice easier for the man or woman on the ground delivering programming. Like I said to you, it doesn't replace the coach, but to some degree it just makes programming that little bit more kind of time friendly. It's obviously ecologically relatively friendly. You're taking the paper process out of programming, and essentially it was developed in America to, like I say, support one S&C coach who might be on the ground at a 400 student athletes they've got to look after, and just literally you can access this online, you can access it on your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever it might be, and just take the stress off one person who might be the only S&C coach at a D3 school. Like I said to you, I think if you're at a D1 school with huge amount of resources, most football programs have 5, 6, 7 S&C coaches. That's not where this kind of technology was aimed at. This technology was aimed at helping the smaller schools, and I think that's one of the things that excites me the most about bringing this kind of technology to the UK marketplace. It's not going to take the place of S&C coaches who are going to coach and deliver high quality kind of movement competency and obviously deliver on the ground, but it is going to help their labour intensiveness when it comes to building out periodization models and building out programming that's just, like I say, sound principles being followed, just allowing you to coach and not necessarily spend hours and hours writing programs. So, I mean, that's the one biggest thing that I had from it. And I mean, the reason why at Adivus as high performance manager, I took this on board is because, like I said to you, in terms of rugby in North America, it's not a well-resourced sport. It's not a sport like American football where there's huge amount of resource put into that area. So for me, it was a way of sort of scaling good quality, sound programming, and try to get that to as many people as possible so that we could help as many people as possible physically develop to play the game at the best level that they're capable of playing. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of relationships that I wanted to spend time on and build into kind of my working practice, so that that technology is hopefully going to be available on a global level rather than just kind of be in North America that nobody else knows about. And I'm sure there's other platforms in the UK marketplace or even in on the global scale that are going to do something similar. But they were just one of the sort of companies that I really aligned with and spent a lot of time with, because I just thought that it was a really valuable kind of S&C tool moving forward in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So just to kind of go off on a tangent a little bit, which I know we always do, but you mentioned about kind of taking valuable time away from S&C coaches, and it was one thing that another guy who we're going to discuss a little bit later, Brett Bartholomew, discussed in his, I think it was his first of the two that he's done, with regarding coach health. And Brett got pretty passionate about this, and something that's maybe not discussed enough. I think he was discussing it from probably a college setting where, it's the done thing to, as we know with our friends at the Seahawks, getting in at 5 o'clock in the morning and not leaving till 10 o'clock at night. Do you just want to have I know we've spoke about it personally, but just want to have a little chat about the importance of that and having an understanding that you do actually have to have a life outside of that, because a tired coach is going to lead to poor programming decisions or no coaching at all. You just want to give us a little bit of an insight into kind of your views around that?
Oh no, 100%. I mean, I'm pleased you asked. I just think from a performance standpoint, us as coaches have got a kind of responsibility to give our athletes the best possible kind of, or the best possible attention, or give them and provide them the tools to excel and to optimize performance. And I think I was really lucky that I had a good mentor during my time in Wales, but Craig White, very well known in rugby circles, British Lions S&C coach. He had Bill Sweetenham from Australian Swimming, and I think he also went and worked for British Swimming and is a pretty successful coach. He came in and audited the Welsh Rugby Union's high performance department, maybe going back 5-6 years. And essentially, just to wrap this in a nutshell, Bill Sweetenham essentially was tied coaches, tied program, and I think I've tweeted that a couple of times over the last 2 or 3 years, and I wholeheartedly believe that as well. I think we're trying to optimize performance of athletes, and I think we should also personally look at optimizing our own performance and giving the athlete the best of yourself. So if we're trying to be whether it's ego driven or whether it's just protectionism, and you're worried about your current situation, you think someone's outworking you, or I totally agree with Brett. I don't think you should work smarter and not harder. And again, this is the sort of evolution of performance services when it comes to like digital provision. The reality is, if we're exhausted and we're getting to work at 5 a.m. and we're not leaving till 9-10 o'clock at night, which, like you say, is kind of prevalent in some American sports particularly, but also there is that kind of mindset that some of the people in the UK are first in and last out. You've actually got to look at yourself and think about the quality of work that you're delivering, especially from a coaching standpoint, and think, am I really giving my athletes the best possible kind of coaching attention if I'm absolutely exhausted by 6 o'clock at night or whatever it may be. And I found the transition into cricket quite interesting there, because I've worked now with slightly smaller groups than I'm used to working with, and I'm coaching, and this is a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm now coaching again more and more hours in a day and not less and less, which is what I used to do when I was high performance manager. My kind of coaching and other responsibilities split was probably 30% and 70%. Is now I think now I've kind of gone back to potentially 50% of my working day is coaching and 50% is everything else that's on the periphery of that. So I think it's a really interesting kind of conundrum, I suppose, that the young S&C coaches working into this profession have got to kind of charge themselves with, okay, am I going to do the best job possible for 8 hours a day, or am I going to just kind of blend into this mediocrity of 12 to 14 hour days and just kind of ride the crest of the wave while I can, or am I really going to get the best out of it? And I think Brett makes some really valid points about working smarter. And for me, I definitely, when I get to interview potential interns or even potential kind of candidates for future roles, what are your interests outside of sport? Because or outside the sport that you're applying for. Because I think you need that. Again, it goes back again to that person and that rounded kind of personality. Do you just want somebody who's happy to number crunch, data analyze, and not really offer anything outside of that particular kind of sphere of influence that, like I say, broadening your horizons from having outside interests. Sorry, that went on about 10 minutes when it should have been 2 minutes. Sorry, mate.
No, that's fine, mate. That's fine. And I think that's something that is you can easily get dragged into, thinking that because it's so competitive and feel like you're falling behind if you're not doing. Even if you're not coaching, like I've got a job from 9 till 5, which is 50% coaching. But when I get home, the guy I know who's working at so-and-so club, he's reading 15 books a month, and he's also writing journal articles for his website. And it's easy to get roped into thinking that 24 hours a day has to be all consumed in this drive towards this thing that is supposed to be out there. Whereas it's actually putting things into a bit of context and like you say, working smarter rather than harder.
Yeah, I think so. I personally don't think number of hours at the office is kind of what's the right word? Just gonna blank it. It's that's not number is 18 hours a day at work. that does leave you. But we all know that, sleep deprivation and the, immunity and health related issues come from, not looking after yourself properly. And then we're telling our athletes, we're trying to educate our athletes on, like I say, optimizing behaviors. You can't live an 18-hour a day work day and expect to be, optimizing your output towards that organization that you're employed to work for. And I don't think anybody could disagree with that, evidence-based or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So just want to give us a little insight into the transition to cricket. And I know we discussed off air before. I think we've just pretty chat about every time we speak, but about the softer skills that you're employing, especially now, maybe a little bit more in the cricket environment. But how that has the need for that has kind of developed over time, or your personal development has kind of come on in that regard.
Sure. No, I think that some of the lessons learned, I don't want to admit it, but I'm into my 20 plus year of, coaching and S&C provision to athletes who are, high skilled, arguably, confident, alpha males, this, that, and the other. And I think the lessons that I've learned, particularly from my exposure to reasonably high level rugby in Wales, particularly, but also some of the, like I said, even when we touched on this sort of American exposure to training American athletes as a British S&C coach and having to break down some of those barriers and, basically essentially use good quality soft skills and communication and effective communication to get your message across, and two, to help you get the job done. And I think one of the things that I learned, or I have learned over the years particularly, is just to be honest, clear and effective with my communication to playing populations from the start. I've obviously worked in sport for a long time and had a few frustrations and learnt lessons along the way. And the reality of that would be that inevitably I got given an opportunity when I first started in cricket to present to the players, and I had a half-hour presentation, nothing fancy, but it just outlined expectations, and it just literally was a 12-slide presentation. This is me, this is what I'm about, this is what I hopefully can do for you. I want to help you, I'm a support staff member, I want to drive on-field performance, and like I say, I can help you in any way and as best I can. And the reality of that has been that I've had to, utilize those soft skills to help coerce, shall we say, some of the more highly talented, very skill-orientated players to take their physical preparation more seriously. For those who don't know much about cricket, and there might be some in America listening, or there might be some wherever listening about high skill sport, high bowling workloads in terms of fast bowling, lots of stress. Batsmen, on the other hand, can hit a 90-mile-an-hour ball all over the park if they're, they've got high levels of technical and tactical prowess. Unbelievable. I mean, some of the stuff I saw in the winter, particularly from a skills standpoint, was mind-blowing. Some of the, like we've talked about off air, the evolving kind of nature of T20 cricket and the sort of short form of the game has essentially led to or brought about an evolving kind of cricket athlete, I suppose. And that was the one thing that I wanted to tell to these guys. I said, listen, it's not what I know and it's not what I've experienced over the last 20 years that's important. It's what I can get you to do. And some of the guys, to start with, didn't really see the relevance of some of the stuff we were doing, or didn't really want to buy into some of the stuff that maybe I wanted to deliver. And I kind of bided my time, bearing in mind I've only been at the current organisation like 3 or 4 months. I've just slowly just chipped away and just got to know players on an individual level better, and not gone in and tried to make wholesale changes to a program and get pushback that's obviously, you butt heads with personalities, you butt heads with players. Just a little bit of sort of softly, trickle, and just like I say, build relationships first, and then ask players individual questions, ask players what their primary motivations are, what their goals are, how can I help you get to the goals that you want to set yourself, and just essentially, like I say, just be a support staff member that can help you optimize your performance. And I think one of the kind of telling features for me was that yesterday, we're playing a 4-day game at the moment, typical British weather, it rained off. We got rained off, and half the day yesterday was spent watching the rain come down. And 7 out of the guys that are on the ground yesterday, 7 out of 12. We obviously got 11 people playing and a substitute. 7 of the 12 guys came to the gym yesterday and did some work. And for me, I think historically, looking back at years gone by in the cricket circles, from what I hear, that wouldn't have necessarily been the case. So obviously, some of that kind of relationship building is starting to pay off with just talking to players, building a kind of, repertoire of, okay, what do you want to do? What do you like to do? What do you need to do? And just from there, just try to tease out, okay, boys, let's not sit and watch the rain come down. Let's go and do some physical work, because there's going to be times in the year, the calendar's so congested, you're not going to get opportunities to do the physical work that we want to do. So I know you can't necessarily keep all your physical qualities in the bank, but at least just the boys are just starting to think about being an athlete and being a technical and tactical kind of sports person. And that's all that I want to try and tease out of them, is basically build a better athlete for the tactical and technical coaches to inherit, so they get better players on the field. Because as you and I both know, I don't think we've worked in any sport where becoming a better athlete is going to make you worse at your particular sport. So, that was my mindset coming in. And like I say, the transition's been, I won't lie to you, it's been pretty challenging. You're building new relationships, and that's the part that's kind of interests me, and that's the part that really kind of drives me. I want to see some of our players that are on the kind of England bubble turn into England international players, and that'll give me obviously huge levels of satisfaction. So, that's kind of where I'm at the moment, and just like I say, just intertwining some technology bits and pieces, hopefully bringing my experiences from, a more global high performance manager role into a department that can evolve and hopefully add a little bit of a performance benefit.
Mm-hmm. So just before I let you go, something that I think kind of links in quite nicely with that, and something again that I think we probably touch on every time we speak, is the future of S&C and where you see things evolving. What do you think about
that? The marketplace, like I think I've said to a few times, I think the marketplace is moving so quickly. And I think, both of us and others have talked about kind of the internship situation in the UK marketplace particularly. I don't think it's any better elsewhere, to be honest, having like I say, experienced the American sports system as well. But I just think that teams are going to, like I said, look a little bit outside of sport to look for that performance advantage. I think, and I know, like I said, I'm not going to rehash it, but Scott Draw alluded to it as well. It's just looking outside of sport to get better at sport. I think it is the kind of All Blacks model. I mean, they are one of the most successful sports teams ever. Better people make better All Blacks. Better people are going to make better S&C coaches as well. And I think it just keeps on going. And I know Twitter is a great vehicle to learn, to network, to share good information. Also, on the flip side of that, it's a great vehicle to get frustrated, to get despondent by the gurus and the salesmen and all that sort of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I think that needs to be said. But also on that front, I think the whole, who I follow and who I respect in the industry, they're all good people. They're all good people. They all want to share information. There's very little ego, that kind of thing. And I think there's, from my point of view as a sort of 40-plus-year-old practitioner, you've got to be on the edge of the science. You've got to be on the edge of the research. You've got to be on the edge of sort of academia. But also, I think from my point of view, looking at as a head of department, for example, I'm always going to look, to quote Darren Roberts, like intellectual horsepower. I'm going to try and get intellectual horsepower in. And I want to be the dumbest person in my department. I want, super intellectual people that are going to help, but I also want people who can coach. And I think, again, I don't want to rehash the same point, but it's going back to good people, clear communicators, people who are comfortable and secure in themselves, that I haven't got all the answers. And I think this is another thing that keeps on coming out of slightly older, more experienced practitioners. None of us have the answer, and I have no issue whatsoever going out to outsource through my network, troubleshoot problems, or ask for outside expertise. I personally would love a department of 3 or 4 different contrasting skill sets. As long as everyone is a bit like the Dave Brailsford kind of philosophy, as long as everybody is sort of focused on the outcome that we all want as an organization, having people with, exemplary, computer skills is something that I want in my department. Having someone who's got exemplary, tactical and technical awareness, or whatever it might be, just essentially that sort of differing skill set that really complements each other. And I think that's the one thing that I think in terms of looking at strength and conditioning and sports science particularly is having not necessarily having too broader skill set, but also not having too narrow a skill set where you pigeonhole yourself as, oh, you're just a GPS analyst, or oh, you're just the guy who's going to deal with the heart rate variability, or oh, you're the guy who's the sort of strength and power expert because you've had a gym aware twice, or whatever it might be. No, but you and I both know velocity based training's trendy at the moment. I used tendos back in the 90s, and everyone in America thought I was some sort of guru because I went and did a in-house presentation to University of Washington once about speed and power, or gym-based velocity-based training, because I'd had exposure to that technology from literally the late 90s. And I think these guys, and it's no fault of their own, it's just, like I say, the exposure to different sort of technologies and modalities in America is still slow to catch on, in fairness. And these guys have just bought, it goes back to that resourcing, Rob, to be honest. It's like, okay, what can we spend our money on? Oh yeah, we'll buy a Tendo unit for every single platform in the building. It's like 15 platforms. So, these universities have got resources to burn, but there's that real hunger. There is that real hunger to keep on progressing and keep on adding kind of things to the toolbox. And I think, again, going back to sort of Brett's point, and again, just boring you for one more minute about kind of my last exposure to professional development in America, which was luckily going to Altus down in Arizona and looking at the programming that those guys are putting together from a sort of more track and field standpoint. But it was a really, really insightful week that I spent down there. It's actually looking at your programming, reviewing your programming, and actually thinking about, okay, what can I take out of this program to still remain effective with, the performance optimization, but also, it's almost like the snake bite and the poison. It's like, how much can I take out without doing any damage to my program? And it's sort of not necessarily the minimum effective dose kind of analogy, but it's almost a bit like that. I had a great opportunity to speak to Dan Paff about a few things, and I was blown away by just how insightful that half an hour was with regards to his experiences and his kind of questioning mind. And those kind of scenarios have been really interesting for me from a personal development standpoint, not to necessarily, like I say, look outside of my sport, look outside of a little bubble and just try and, be a bit more global from where I can sort of get the answers to the performance puzzle that we might have to solve. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
That's kind of in a nutshell. I think I might have waffled a bit too much there, but that's the reality of, get me on the subject of where it's going. And, I don't actually know.
Yeah. No, it's fine, mate. All good.
Darren Roberts say.
Yeah.
We're all just winging it.
Yeah.
We're trying to understand, but we're all just winging it.
Yeah. I'm on the edge of my seat for another one of his graphs, by the way, as well. I absolutely love them graphs that he does.
I thought, which is fantastic for Darren Roberts' graphs. He's bang on. He's pretty insightful. He's right. Yeah. I mean, I do all the time talking to Darren, and like I say, I've got a few really good mentors, and again, it goes back to just people who they'll ask difficult questions, and I really appreciate that as a practitioner. I certainly, going back to where I see S&C going, and sports science particularly, you've got to be comfortable in some respects, being uncomfortable, and having yourself challenged either by your own contemporaries in either the profession that you're in or within your organization. And having the head coach ask difficult questions, I have no issue with that whatsoever. I think that's just because everyone wants to push the boundaries and wants to get the results that professional sport requires, because there is innately a degree of pressure that's associated with that. But The other thing I think that I told you, just to answer that one again, just sorry, going on and on and on, is don't just try, and this is the advice for any practitioner, who's especially coming into the industry young. There are more sports in the world than cricket, rugby and football in the UK, for example, where you can do fantastic work without having necessarily the kind of profile exposure to working in professional sport. Because even though I've worked in professional sport, 16, 17 years, whatever it might be, there's so many good opportunities to hone your skills as a practitioner, coaching absolutely anybody from any level, from any sport, to become better than they are today. And I mean, field hockey is a great sport, lacrosse that you've worked in, basketball, whatever it might be, minority sports in the UK. Again, it goes back to Darren Roberts. We've mentioned him too many times for my liking. He'll love that. But he's built himself a really fantastic reputation in extreme sports and worked with some very high-level operators who, no doubt about it, challenge him on a daily basis. And he works in a very niche marketplace now. He works with extreme sports people. But those kind of scenarios, look outside of those main sports. If you think that door's going to close on me time and time again, I'm not getting an interview, I'm not getting an opportunity, well, look for an opportunity elsewhere. I mean, that would be my advice to any young S&C coach, because we both know that there's hundreds and thousands coming out of university on a year-to-year level. I think Lachlan Wilmot brought it up, which I think is a really, really prominent, important point to make as well. My first 5 years in basically strength and conditioning, fitness provision, whatever you want to call it, were in personal training. And I think that was one of the key factors in building effective relationships. And I would advise any S&C coach who thinks they've got too big an ego to be a personal trainer, I would genuinely advise to think again and try to build, or try to go into that environment and actually learn. Your coaching credibility and your skills can develop really, really quickly when you've got that one-on-one attention, and you can really dial in on one person for whether it's half an hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever the session length, it doesn't matter. And I still talk to my first ever personal training client, who is now, this is 20 years ago, and I still train a personal training when time allows. I still train a personal training client that I've known 17 years. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but the reality is I've still got connectivity with relationships that are 20 years old, because I think that is an important part of, coaching and building your repertoire of skills, which aren't just about technical competency.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there 100%. Rule number 1, don't be a dick. That's
right, mate. I think
mate.
Is that in Legacy? I think it's in Legacy. I mean, great book is there for
yes.
anyone who's not been on the planet long enough to know that the All Blacks are phenomenal. I mean, no, mate, it's true. That's rule number 1. And like I say, I mean, I'm trying. I don't have to necessarily be the friend of every athlete I work with, but ultimately, I do want to get to know them better, to get more out of them. And I've had a few tough conversations, even over the last 2 or 3 months in my new role. And I'm not going to be shy to have a conversation with the player. But on the other side of the coin, I think you've got to have enough strength of character to be resilient enough in sport, to ask difficult questions, expect to be challenged, but also, ultimately, have enough respect from a mutual standpoint, from a player-coach relationship perspective, to get your work done. And you just need a timeline for that. You can't expect to make wholesale sort of intervention changes over 3 or 4 months. This is the process of getting into different players' psyche is going to take a little bit of time. And I think that is also something that young coaches have got to think about, that they're not going to be able to go into high profile sports teams and make an impact from ball one. It's the Mike Boyle kind of analogy. What is it? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, used in that order. So true. Open your eyes, open your ears, not necessarily, speak too often, but just if you do speak, make sure that it's sort of pertinent information.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Twitter a few times. So where can people follow you on Twitter?
I'm simple at ChrisToom71 is my Twitter handle. I try to be, as some of people have pointed out to me in the past privately, I try to be as positive as possible on there. Share good information, retweet good stuff that I think is valuable to the industry. I don't tend to rant too much because you can't really in 140 characters, but every now and again, I mean, we've both talked about this off air. The reality is it's a great medium social media is brilliant for lots of good reasons, but we both know that it can get a little frustrating too. But I think I just like to take the positives out of it. And like I say, it's easy for me to unfollow someone who doesn't either educate me, use me every now and again. And, like I say, I enjoy the social interaction. I've met people from all over the world. In fact, I met someone yesterday. I mean, I know we've been talking a while, but an Aussie S&C coach helped me out in the off season with one of the players who I worked with, who's having a summer or a winter out in Australia playing his cricket down there. Wanted some testing done so we could just benchmark a player before he came back to the UK. We met through social media. He's now in the UK on a little bit of a tour in his off season. Comes in and spends the day with me yesterday. Nice. That's all come about through networking and through social media. And there's obviously connectivity everywhere across the globe from that. I met Ian McKeown from Port Adelaide in Altis, but I met him months and months and years ago on social media. Same with Lachlan, who's at the GSW in Australia. He was in Seattle seeing the Seahawks. We were social media friends. We connected over we had a breakfast meeting, fashionable in America. We just you can connect with people all over the world. And I have social media friends that live in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, South America, whatever. And that connectivity helps you grow as a practitioner. And, I think most people in strength and conditioning and sports science have a real thirst for kind of continued learning. And I'm not any different. I want to, I like stuff on Twitter pretty much every other day. Oh, yeah, I like that article. I'll read that when I get 5 minutes. Or, I'll send so-and-so a message because, we met Brandon Marcello at the Sports Science Conference in Seattle, and he's just, I've only met him for 2 days, made a connection, back and forward with a few emails about various things. He's big in his sleep science and some pieces. Just had a baby, congratulatory text, whatever it might be. It's just, you're just connecting with people around the world. Brett Bartholomew is another perfect example. I know we've talked about him from a coaching standpoint. I slept on his couch. I'd never met the bloke in my life. Altis, last day, checked out of my hotel, gave him a call. What are you up to today? Come over for lunch. I basically spent the afternoon with him and his wife, hung out, talked SC, slept on his couch, got up, went to the airport next day. I mean, just that's a social media connect. So, I know we're going off tangent again. Twitter is fantastic for, connectivity and, making relationships work. And hopefully when I go to LA again one year, I'll be knocking on Unbreakable's door and going to hang out with Brett and all the rock stars that he trains,
Yeah. You the Rock and Brett?
Well, yeah, Rob Gronkowski, whoever it might be, some of the rock stars in sport. But no, I'm not really that bothered if they're there, but I'd like to hang out with Brett. He's a great bloke and he's got good energy. And those are the things that Twitter is useful for.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well,
great.
I'm going to let you go because you've got another day of cricket tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So I'll let you go, but thanks again for your time, and it's been good to chat.
Likewise, Rob. Appreciate it. Thanks for the secondary invitation.
Pleasure.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Absolute pleasure. Select group.
Absolutely.
All right, mate. We'll speak soon.
Cheers, Rob.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 83 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Chris. So massive thanks to both Chris for coming on the show and having a really good chat for episode 83. And also massive thanks to both CoachMePlus and Vald Performance, the team behind the Nordboard, for sponsoring the episode today. So got some great guests coming up over the next couple of weeks, as always, hopefully. If there's anyone specifically that people want to hear from, just drop me a message and and just fire the names my way. The more the merrier. Love recommendation rather than just making it purely selfish. Like to get people involved and get people on who people actually want to hear from. So I hope you enjoyed the chat with Chris, and thanks for tuning in to episode 83.